A more celebrated Black British writer today with local connections, currently enjoying a lot of publicity, is Bernardine Evaristo, who grew up in Woolwich, the fourth of 8 children born to an English school-teaching mother and a Nigerian father, Danny, who became the first black local councillor in the borough of Greenwich. Bernardine went to drama school rather than university, but came to Goldsmiths some years ago to do a PhD in creative writing. I was a supervisor, and I have to say she was the least demanding PhD student I've ever known. She'd already published several books by then. She was keen to get the doctorate in order to secure a university teaching post. So she effectively worked on her own for 3 years, and at the end of them presented me with a finished manuscript. Perfect. The book wasn't Girl, Woman, Other, which won the Man Booker Prize a couple of years ago, but the novel that preceded it, Mr. Loverman, about 2 Afro-Caribbean men in their 70s living in London who for years have been pursuing a clandestine gay affair. I recommend it. Like Girl, Woman, Other, Bernardine has this skill I think she developed at drama school, the skill of being able to invent an authentic voice. I'm coming up to the present day, but I want to just go back a little in time to a woman writer associated with in the area, another one, Edith Nesbit, the author of best-selling children's books such as The Railway Children and 5 Children Knit, whose first local address was Oxford Terrace off Blackheath Hill. Then after she married, Elswick Road off Loampit Vale, to which George Bernard Shaw was a regular visitor. Now, the latest biography of Nesbit suggests that Edith was very much up for an affair with Shaw, and then when he turned her down after spending acres of time alone with her, she told him, "You had no right to write the preface if you were not going to write the book." For his part, he once reportedly told a friend that he thought the sexual act was so monstrous and indecent that he could not understand how any self-respecting couple could face each other in the daylight after spending the night together. Anyway, Edith Nesbit then lived in various addresses in Lee before eventually settling in Well Hall, in a vast and ramshackle moated hall with 4.5 acres, where after sales of her books had begun to dry up, she took in paying guests and began selling produce from the house on the front lawn opposite the tram stop. So we have poets, playwrights, novelists, philosophers, children's writers, and also Malcolm Lowry, author of Under the Volcano, who came here at the age of 18 in order to be tutored for the Cambridge entrance exam, and lived in Woodville Road off the Rochester Way. Now, it can't be claimed that Blackheath's pubs were what set Lowry on the road to alcoholic ruin. It seems he already had the habit. But the area did play a later role in his life as well, when he returned from Mexico to spend several weeks in the Brook Hospital drying out, and where all apparently was going well until a BBC crony of his turned up and took him to the pub, after which he fell off the wagon again. Now, I'm not somebody who knows the work of Edgar Wallace very well. Some of you here may do. He was born in Ashburnham Grove, and for 30 years lived in Brockley. His origins are make a wilder tale than any of his novels, and his output as a writer was extraordinary. In one year, 1926, he published 14 titles. In fact, there was a joke that if someone phoned him and was told, "I'm sorry, he's busy writing a novel," the person would say, "Don't mind, it's okay, I'll wait." He went on to write the original screenplay for King Kong. Characteristically, he wrote 110 pages in 5 days, and some people say it was better than the screenplay that was finally used. Can we lay claim to Raymond Chandler? Well, I'm not sure, but he came to England at the age of 12, lived in Upper Norwood, and then he was 5 years at Dulwich College, where he also worked for a time as a substitute teacher, and supposedly was seen wearing the Dulwich straw boater with the cornflower Dulwich blue ribbon many years later. And many years after him, the novelist Graham Swift went to Dulwich on a scholarship. Now, he's a writer in whose work South London often features, for instance, in Waterland, which is mostly set in the Fens, but which has as its narrator a South London schoolteacher whose wife, desperate for a child, snatches a baby outside Tesco's in Lewisham. And then there's Graham Swift's Last Orders, which won the Booker Prize, in which 5 drinking companions go on a kind of Chaucerian pilgrimage, their mission being to scatter the ashes of their friend Jack, a journey from Bermondsey via Rochester, Chatham and Canterbury to end in Margate. Now here's one of them, Ray, in the back of the car on the A2. I look out the window. Blackheath isn't black, and it isn't a heath. It's all green under a blue sky. If it weren't for roads crisscrossing it, it would make a good gallop. Highwayman here once, coaches to Dover. Your money or your life. Back to Don Juan, and back maybe to that doubleness, an appreciation of the beauty of the place, the green grass of Blackheath, down in Greenwich, a river running by. Blackheath is this sort of mad, bad, slightly dangerous place, and this glorious semi-rural pastoral retreat. I'm getting towards the end here, but I want to at least list, because somebody will complain if I don't mention them, some of the other writers who were born here or who settled in southeast London, or who just paid a visit, like Bernard Shaw, who spoke here at the halls shortly after they opened, or T.S. Eliot, who in 1917 gave a series of Friday night lectures at the County High School in Sydenham. Sydenham also being the home for most of the 1980s to the novelist and Nobel Prize winner later, Kazuo Ishiguro, whose publisher was Faber, was T.S. Eliot's old firm. There's John Masefield, who lived in Diamond Terrace for 3 years. Henry Williamson, author of Tarka the Otter, who came from Ladywell. Mervyn Peake, author of the Gormenghast trilogy, born in China but educated at Eltham College, which has a library named after him. The poets Charles Madge and Kathleen Raine, who lived at 6 Groats Buildings, Blackheath, the HQ for the mass observation experiment in the 30s, in which another key player was the documentary filmmaker Humphrey Jennings, who lived just off Lea High Road. There's the crime writer Julian Simmons, whose books include one called The Blackheath Poisonings. Spike Milligan grew up in India, but arrived in Brockley at the age of 12, went to school in Catford and Lewisham, and then worked as a clerk in the Woolwich Arsenal. Also from Brockley, the poet, thought to be Welsh, yes, David Jones, author of a modernist epic about the First World War, in parenthesis. There's Paul Threw, lived in Catford. Claire Tomlin, and before her Denton Welsh, lived in Crooms Hill. Michael Frayn, now of course married to Claire Tomlin. One of his novels features Diamond Terrace, and one of his plays, Benefactors, is thought to have been inspired by the time he spent living at North Several in Orchard Drive. I could mention, if I were going beyond writers, how we seem to attract cartoonists like Martin Rowson from The Guardian and Peter Brooks from The Times. And weirdly, before that, because I associate him with the North and naughty postcards, Donald McGill, who lived just around the corner here in Bennett Park, which was also home to the studios of the GPO film unit, where W.H. Rawdon and Benjamin Britten collaborated on their great 1930s documentary, Night Mail. I could go on. You'll be relieved to hear I won't, except to mention that a more recent arrival in Blackheath is the great Norwegian novelist Karl Ove Knausgaard, author of the 6-volume autobiographical epic, My Struggle. Not everyone loves it. I do. Who was last I heard, he was living off Belmont Hill. I mentioned Goldsmiths, and I ought to mention my colleague Francis Spufford, whose latest novel came out this year, Light Perpetual, is set in New Cross, the site of a World War II bomb falling, and then throughout southeast London in the novel. I mentioned that also at Goldsmiths, that poetry class I ran. Another person who came to it, and I really am near the end now, was Wendy Cope. Born in Erith, educated at schools in Sidcup and Chislehurst, and at the time I knew her living in a flat in Kestrel Avenue, Herne Hill. She was a primary school teacher in those days, and by her own admission, not a happy person. But the first poems she began to write after she got through her depression were fun. There were parodies and pastiches of poets we studied in that poetry class, including Philip Larkin and Ted Hughes, and it was those poems dominated her first collection, Making Cocoa for Kingsley Amis. I mention her because she invented a hapless South London poet called Jason Strugnell, whose sonnets bemoan his various failures in life, not least with women, until he finds that being a poet is a good way to pull in women. To quote from the end of one of Wendy's Jason Strugnell poems, "For years I poured my unfulfilled desire into sad songs, and now, to my delight, find women love a bard, however dire, and overlook my paunch because I write. One doesn't need much literary skill to be the Casanova of Tulse Hill." So I'm back where I began, with the Casanova of light verse, a Don Juan in South London. Both Lord Byron and Jason Strugnell find the area a little grot, but also strangely inspiring, a place to soar on poets' wings. It's been the same for me. References to the place are threaded through my work, from the old hardware shop, now gone, opposite Greenwich Picture House, which wasn't there then, to Cresswell Park, where a car nearly ran me down once, an episode that gets into the book about my dad. And then all the foxes which thread through my novel South of the River, and other things I've written too. Of course, I still think of myself as a Yorkshireman. But after 40 years of living here, I'm almost ready to think of Blackheath and Greenwich as home. And also prepared to admit I'm not the first writer to have lived here. Thank you.